Should we do we just started the interview and opened Zoom and said hello? This is going to be good. So we're obviously going to be talking to Michael Pope. He's the one holding the guitar. David Puleo. He's the one wearing a toque, not a beanie. I'm in Canada. It's a toque. And we're going to basically talk through your pedalboard, Michael Pope,
Yes,
and
sir.
the man behind the build, David Puleo. So just a really quick background as we get into this, and I'm sure you guys will highlight whatever I get wrong. David works for and with Goodwood Audio. He is the master behind all of the custom builds that you would have seen from late 2019 and onwards, I guess. Hey, David.
Yeah. The only build I did in 2018 was actually my second build for Pope, the one that we filmed the video with. But yeah, then it really kind of picked up for me in 2019 as people found out that we had a USA Goodwood base.
And where are you talking to us from, David?
Redding, California.
Beautiful.
Tried and true.
Yeah, Pope knows this place.
Very well.
So David is in Redding at our U.S. location, and then Pope is obviously a guitar player. You, after the last build, Pope, you were just about to move to Nashville.
Yeah.
And obviously, in the past, you're very heavily involved with Bethel, playing guitars, writing. I assume doing some producing as well and just helping bring everything together. You just mentioned previously you love a good MD session. Music director, for those that don't know what an MD is.
Yeah.
And so what have you been up to since moving to Nashville? Like, tell us what life has been like for the last, I guess, couple years over there.
Yeah, man. It's been interesting for sure. A lot of the initial year of being out here was just kind of slowing down and taking a break. I guess I was just burned out from all the traveling and all the stuff. I was like, you know what, I need to just chill for a while. And so last year was, a lot of that, just kind of spending time with family, unexpectedly kind of moving as quickly as we did, presents its own challenges and stuff. So, we've had some hurdles along the way to figure out. And it's been nice to not have to, well, I'm going to go dip out on tour for a month. Have fun figuring this out, wife.
I've heard that wives love that.
Yeah, man, they love it. So no, it's just been super good to be home, and I've just been focusing on, writing and doing sessions and that kind of thing. And certainly now that COVID is here, that's all anybody is really doing. So, yeah, at this point, I'm just, riding out the storm and writing and playing as much as I can.
And you're also teaching lessons, is that right?
Yeah. I've just been doing like Zoom lessons, like a lot of other, players of all kinds out there. Less of a like traditional guitar lesson, more of like a guitar hang. Most people want to know about like, church dynamics. How did this or that happen at Bethel, or like, how do you record or write parts or something like that. So less traditional, like, here's a major scale guitar lesson. But yeah, just meeting people from all over and hanging out, talking guitars, fun stuff.
Love it, man. So what inspired this build? Like, why now? Why did you want to get the build done? What was the catalyst to get this thing going?
Well, this whole thing started not terribly long after moving here. Myself and the other Thunderbird guys, Dan and Jimmy, we went out to Texas to do a live record out there, and started out as a producing thing, and then ended up I was gonna play on it. And so I was like, okay, cool, time to load up the gear again, get it all over there. Did the record, everything went great. Got home, I'm in the baggage claim, and all my bags show up except for the pedalboard. And normally, I've been there before, so I'm like, all right, I'll just wait a few extra minutes, and 30 minutes later, nothing. Check your app. Well, it made it to Nashville, so I know it's here. So you go and you track down the usually very grumpy batch whoever person at the airport and say, "Hey, my bag's here, but it's not. Help me." And another 30 minutes later, when this sweet lady carried that very heavy board out of the oversized baggage door, I noticed like one of the latches wasn't closed all the way, and at that moment I knew something was going on, uh, and I opened it, and man, in all my travels, international, domestic, whatever, I've never had a board where every single pedal had been pried up with like a tool
Oh,
too, because like there were scratches like on the side and the bottom that weren't there previously. That includes the switcher. The PVC was ripped up, every single cable unplugged from every pedal. And they went so far as to think that there could possibly be something under the cables, or they just decided to ruin somebody's day because they like ripped up the cables and the zip tie anchors like off the board as well, and just piled it back in and like jammed the lid shut. And I was so mad and bummed out after that. I just left it in my garage for like 3-4 months. It just sat. I was like,
oh man.
I can't deal with this. Like, this is, oh man, it gets me. And I kind of went through this phase of like, you know what? Like, I'm not trying to travel for the foreseeable future right now. Like, I don't need a pedal board, I guess. Like, I'll just plug stuff in on the floor or on the desk, like plenty of other people do in studios. And at first, like, the no pedal board thing was cool because like, I've had all these pedals on like shelves for years. And so you go through and you try things and rediscover things, and you go through that journey. There's a downside to all that stuff too. And like all that kind of stuff just like pulls your brain out of creative headspace. And so you get on a roll tracking some part and you're like, oh man, this is cool. This is sweet. And you're like, oh man, I need this other pedal. Where did it go? And so I just started running into that kind of stuff, And so I was like, man, you know what? It's time to do another pedal board. I just need that kind of workflow back in my life. And man, since having it, I should have done it sooner. But I mean, at the same time, like COVID's been kind of a nice time to just figure out all that stuff and get it handled. While there's certainly not any live gigs going around, and I haven't really, I mean, since it hit, I haven't gone and worked in another studio. I've just, worked out of home. We moved out of our studio, so we don't even really have that anymore. We're just all kind of in our homes. And so, yeah, it was just a good time. I was like, you know what? I've got a good gap in between work. If something does come in while you guys have all this stuff, I'll just, make it work with other gear that I've got. But yeah, man, that's kind of the story.
I was kind of passively bugging you for being a high maintenance, not just guitar player, but like a high maintenance person in general, for needing to get 2 setups in 2 years when the first setup was great.
It was nails,
But
man. It was awesome. It was awesome.
hearing that, hearing the backstory, it just makes you cringe, man. It's like, why?
It was
Why would the
nightmare.
airport do that to you?
I'll just be like,
And on
man,
a domestic
I'm
flight.
really lucky. Yeah. Just coming back from Texas to Nashville. Like,
All I got from you was a text. I'm actually glad you didn't send me a picture, but when you sent me the text and you said that every plug had been unplugged from the PVC, my heart dropped.
yeah.
I was like, a little tip I've been giving guys lately is leaving a like laminated note in your gear. Just thanking TSA for being awesome and keeping us safe, and also letting them know this is like your musical equipment and it's part of your job. And if they could take good care of it, you'd appreciate it. And so far the results have been really good. So
Brilliant.
I don't know if it's because of the note or just luck, but it's worth a shot, for you traveling musicians out there.
That might be one of the best pieces of advice people will hear on this whole interview. So, Pope, on the last setup that we did, that we set up a couple years ago, you shook things up by, at that point, you're still quite involved with Bethel and playing a lot of church style music, among other things with Thunderbird Studios. But you ditched the Timeline Big Sky the Strymon Big Sky and Strymon Timeline, your delay and reverb. A lot of people
Hornets now.
flooded reverb, and the price of Timelines and Big Skies dropped overnight just because of the sheer quantity of people trying to sell these things.
Man, I don't know about that.
That is on you. But you basically you switched to two of the GFI specular tempuses.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to say them in plural. It's
like
moose and moosen.
Meese, I don't know.
You switched to two specular tempuses. Firstly, what was the thought behind that, and why did you want to do that? And what is the thought behind the change that you made again to your delays and reverbs this time coming around, which we'll get to the audio examples later?
Oh, man. Well, first of all, for the record, I still like all of those pedals, man. As soon as I switched to the GFI stuff, it was like, wait, what's wrong? What's wrong? Do you not like Timelines anymore? Like, do you think the Big Sky sounds bad? No, not at all. Like, the reason I changed had nothing to do with like being unhappy with the quality of the sounds, and everything to do with I'd been hearing those sounds for like 6, 7, 8 years. Like, I don't even know how long, like for so long. And I think sometimes, like, you know, we've all got staple pieces of gear that we've used forever, and that's great. And some things are classics. Those can absolutely be. I mean, I think those will go down in history as very classic pedals, and you can use them for so many different things. But I just kind of got to a point with them where, like, I feel like I need to keep things fresh for my ears, and I need to just hear something different for a little while. And so, I mean, I bought, sold, and traded so many delays and reverbs, looking for stuff that could do that the Strymon pedals could. You know, it just wasn't finding anything. And then I remembered I had a specular Tempest sitting on my shelf that they had very kindly sent me. I just remember plugging that thing in and being like blown away with how great it sounded. It could do all the same things that I needed it to do. So it just checked all those boxes, and it sounded fresh enough to my ears that it was like, okay, this like feels inspiring again. And so I messaged them and was like, hey, like, can I buy another one? And they're like, yeah, totally. So bought two, one for delay, one for reverb. The only reason they're not on this board is because to edit sounds on them, the way that I want to edit sounds, it involves using the software editor. You know, the four knobs on top are really great for tweaking stuff on the fly and doing that. But to really edit things the way I want to, you know, I like to do in-depth editing really fast. You know, if I'm doing a session in town somewhere, we could be doing anywhere from 4 to 6 songs in a day. And so you get, you know, 3, maybe 4 passes a song to come up with everything and perform it well and have it be done. And so there's just not time to really do anything other than reach down, spin a few knobs, and have that be the sound. So with this rig, I wanted it to have some preset capability. Obviously, the RJM's there. But for the most part, like, I can just run the whole thing as kind of like an instant access traditional pedal board if we're moving really, really fast and I don't have time to jump into that stuff. This is kind of everything I need, nothing I don't. And whereas the last rig was very much like, let's build one board to do everything. But this is just geared really towards like just sitting and playing, getting the sounds that way. If I start touring again or something, then we'll be doing another board, you know, geared towards that. And that's just, you know, I've just learned like that's how I need to be doing things to, you know, to have the workflow that I'm wanting to have these days. Like I said, I'm really done with being caught up in gear and option overload. Like, I just want to turn everything on and write music.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, on that note, it's interesting to see kind of the different options that studio guys will have compared to live guys. And like, probably the main thing that I've noticed is in the delays. And then probably even with like switching systems, a lot of guys who do studio work won't necessarily see the need for a switching system quite as much, unless if they're just, you know, really wanting the clarity and the cleanliness of it. But then also in the delays and verbs, like, you know, the guys who are playing live, they want the screen readout with the BPM, with like a million presets, all of that. And a lot of the studio guys boards that I see, you know, instead of having a timeline, they'll have an El Cap or a Brigadier or
Yeah.
something like that. That's just a little bit more like hands-on, functional, quick tweaks. Maybe not quite as worried about locking into like perfect BPM. And so that's kind of been like my observations, you know, they'll have like a Flint instead of a Big Sky,
Yeah.
stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting to see, you know, depending on the role that you're playing or the job that you have, the different options that guys choose. This board definitely to me feels more like a studio board.
Is this
Yeah.
board Pope going to be mainly used in mono, stereo? How are you going to run it?
Probably mono or stereo. I'm in mono right now only because, so when COVID hit, we had to move out of our studio. All of our work just kind of evaporated at the same time. And so we ended up moving out of there just because the overhead was too much and nobody knew what this time was going to look like. And man, that was a good decision. And so when I moved home, you know, I've always been like a very, I don't want to say like classic old school, but just like, you know, I've always done things like if you go to any studio out there, if you're paying time for a studio, it's going to be a microphone into a good preamp into Pro Tools, you know, or tape, but mostly, you know, microphone, preamp, Pro Tools, and you stick your amp in an ISO room, you crank it up, get it in the zone, and that's the sound. You can either, you know, mess around with the amp or you can use pedals, whatever. And that's how all the records that I, you know, love have pretty much been made that way. And that's just always how I've done it. But to make moving home even more complicated, my wife and I are starting a renovation on our home. And so we're not even in like a house. Like this is a little Airbnb apartment we're renting from my in-laws right now while the house gets fixed up. And so there's just really no way for me to have cabinets anywhere, or, you know, even my little like 15-watt Bensons like would just be way too loud. And I mean, proper isolation is also important. So I picked up one of the UA aux things, and I've been using that, and it's been great. But because of that, I mean, I've just got one of them. So it's mono out of the board into my Benson Chimera, which I think you guys heard last time you were in Reading. And then that goes into the aux and, you know, on into Pro Tools. So for right now, the board's in mono, but this aux thing has been so useful. I'm totally going to get another one. And at that point, I'll be able to go stereo, you know, with the board, 2 amps, that kind of thing. But yeah, for now it's in mono, and really, like, you know, I know like stereo and wet, dry, wet, or, you know, even like, you know, true wet, dry, wet versus kind of how people tend to do it just with 3 different amps. All that stuff is usually, at least nowadays, more live stuff. Like I don't know anybody really going into a studio with a full like 3 amp rig with, you know, 2 amps handling effects, and what, like most guys in any studio are just running mono or stereo, you know. Right. And even at that, most of the stereo stuff you hear on records is just a mono guitar sound with a stereo plugin on it. And so I've just kind of been, I mean, that's the approach that I've had to use given current circumstances, but there's been nothing wrong with it. And so again, with this board, like I didn't need some elaborate dry output thing or something. Like, you know, again, if I start playing live again, that'll probably be something we incorporate just as an option, because that's where I feel like that stuff is really useful. But when it comes to recording, like keeping things as simple as possible, I always find it's just the best rule of thumb. So yeah, the board can be mono or stereo. We the Skyway thing, I think that's what you're calling it, that you built in, which is, you know, kind of like an SGI or something. That is a tool that's both great live and in the studio. So it's great to have that, like to just run the pedal board into like a patch box on, you know, in the wall in a studio, and have combo amps in the other room or something. Like that is super, super useful. And obviously, I mean, live for sticking your amps in the back room and that kind of thing. So we incorporated that, and that's able to, obviously go mono or stereo as well. But again, just really, really simple, man. It's really just a traditional, just a normal pedal board with a little bit of, modern flexibility to it.
Love it, man. And David, for you, without giving too much away, because we're about to go through every pedal, any standout effects on this board that really surprised you while you were setting it up?
Man, I think it was my first time hanging out with a microcosm, and that was pretty fun. I literally just started like turning knobs on it.
That's pretty much what you do.
And I don't know, man, just having something like that is so fun, like typically when I test a board, I'll turn on, I have like a pre-recorded loop coming out of a looper pedal, and I'll just run it through the board. And so, both hands, I was just kind of like turning things and surprised by the sounds that were happening. So I'm kind of curious to find out how, Pope plans to use that.
Me too.
But it was definitely like inspiring, to just mess around with. So
Any pedals where you're just like, what's this guy thinking? This is the biggest mistake.
All of the other ones.
Oh, no. I mean, here's what I know about Pope is he's, and maybe he would say something different, but he's pretty particular in what he chooses, even down to signal path. So this is like my third board with Pope, and, a lot of guys like, they'll be like, what do you think as far as should I do this before the volume pedal or, this after the delay or whatever. And Pope pretty much knows what he wants. Maybe in his mind, he doesn't feel like he knows what he wants, but he sends me detailed notes. And he's one of the few guys who's done that, and I kind of love it.
It's because I'm terrified of being high maintenance. That's what it is.
Yeah,
Man, these guys are so busy. I don't need to, I'll just figure it all out and be like, this is what I need.
No, man, it's great. So no, there wasn't really anything that I was like, what the heck? Just more like curious, like, oh, I wonder what he's thinking as far as getting a sound from this.
Yeah. Which actually leads me to another question for you, Pope. Around figuring out your signal chain and what sounds best to your ears. How in the past, I don't know about the evolution of how you've gotten better at this over the years or what you've found, tricks that help. How have you found out the signal chain that you like? Like even on this board, is there anything that you tested out or tried differently this time, or tell us about that?
I mean, anytime I've planned out a board, I just sit on the floor with a power supply at some point. Like, I mean, the first thing is like, okay, what are all the tools that I want to use in my toolbox, right? And so that was kind of it. And so for me, that's where it started. I had the platform already. John from Creation Music Company, shout out to that guy, hooked me up with this rad Aero board, and I love it. Like when he was like, dude, I know you're a Trey guy, check this out. It blew my mind. So I knew that I wanted to, fill this thing out and start there. And so I just kind of grabbed all the pedals that I've been using the most. Like I said, I've been trying a lot of different things, but having done that for so long, you still kind of end up with a group of things you use 95% of the time. And then, the other 5% you go to the shelf. And so I just grabbed all that stuff and started putting it on the board in terms of like a layout. And then we'll just sit on the floor. And for the most part, like, I mean, there's just like standard signal chain stuff, like start with filter into certain modulations and fuzzes, right? Things like phasers or wahs, and univibe like to be before overdrives typically, or certain fuzzes like to be, before a buffer or any of that kind of stuff. Like there's kind of like a suggested signal chain. Like I remember being probably like 15, 16 years old, and like Robert Keeley would have like a thing about it on his website, or so for the most part, I've kind of stuck to that as like a starting place. So, filters, whatever pre-modulation or fuzz, figure that out in the beginning. Overdrive, modulation, delay, reverb, done. But I still, a lot of great music is come about by breaking the rules. So I still test it all with my ears. Ultimately, that's the thing. I'm looking for sounds that inspire me and sound right. Like with this board, you have to put things a little bit out of order when you start getting into like the mono stereo thing. But if you plan things out and you just plug stuff up on the floor and use your ears and listen, like you can figure out how to make all that stuff work. So that's just all I've ever done. And then by that time, I'm like, yep, I know what signal chain I want. I mean, the other thing too is like, I think is great. I mean, obviously you guys wire up so many boards, right? Like you guys have valuable insight. And so I always love hearing, thoughts and opinions from you guys as well. But at the same time, not being in Reading where I can just like run down to David's house and, check it out really quick and then make a decision. Like it's also hard for me to say, oh yeah, let's go ahead and put this pedal later down the chain when I haven't heard it. And so I just try to do all that. I want to know what I'm getting into when I get the board back. Like we all have that sound in our head as guitar players that we're going for. And so this is, figuring all that stuff out is how I know I'm getting there with whatever the end product is going to be.
Yeah.
I admittedly thought I knew more than I do on signal chain. That's my initial statement for what I'm about to say. A couple months ago, Goodwood did a signal chain series for a month. So 4 videos, 1 a week, did it for a month. And I basically just went through typical signal chain and maybe some of the myths around it. I went into it, one example, knowing that octave needs to come before overdrive and delay needs to come before reverb. And I was, in my opinion, to my ears, I was wrong on both.
Yeah.
I made an order switcher where you hit a button and it switches the order of 2 pedals in real time. And so I did that with an octave and I did that with a overdrive. And then on the video, I did, all right, this is the one that's supposed to sound right. And octave into overdrive sounded like it should. Flipped it. Yeah. And with octave after overdrive, the octave was way more pronounced. It just like shone through. And so I was pleasantly surprised by that. Then delay into reverb, I was like, that's the right thing to do. That's one of those rules that you follow. And it probably still is, and I won't change it. But I did reverb into delay into reverb. I closed my eyes and hit the audio examples back and forth. So I didn't know what I was listening to. And I couldn't tell a difference. I don't know. I couldn't tell a difference at all. And it might just be lack of awesome defined ears. Other people probably would, but it was not a stark contrast like what I thought it would be. And so all that to say, I guess for the people watching, is it makes a massive difference, the order of the pedals and how you run them, just like what Pope was just saying. And you really do need to just sit down and experiment by yourself, not knowing the answer already, like I did, and just see what you come up with, and you might be pleasantly surprised. And the other one that I still rave about is tremolo at the very end, after reverb. Tremolo at the end chops everything out, and it just becomes so pronounced. And so, general rule of thumb, I think, is the later the effect is in your chain, the more it will be pronounced as the effect when you turn it on. And the earlier you have it in your chain, the more other effects will kind of take over. And so I don't know if you guys disagree, David, Pope, or agree with anything I just said, but I was, all that to say, surprised at how little I knew about signal chain after so many years of doing it with setups and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
I agree, man.
Yeah. With the tremolo, I kind of like the idea, I think of like plugging into a blackface Fender amp. And, if you're using the onboard trem on the amp, that is the last effect. And that can be a really cool sound. I guess for me, like the main things that I'll ask people about usually are like the volume pedal.
Yep.
And the location of that in conjunction with the drives and the delays and verbs, and how you want those pedals to respond to the volume pedal, because there's a huge difference with the volume before the drives or after the drives. And then there's a huge difference with the volume, before or after the wet effects. And so that's kind of where I really dive in. Other than that, if it's a young guy and he's like, man, literally this is my first board and I have no idea, then I'll give him kind of like the standard go-to, and maybe ask him some questions about what he's trying to achieve. But I've just learned over the years, like when I was younger, I would walk into a live situation or a studio situation and see another guy's board, and I'd kind of prejudge them based on their gear. And I've just learned, that is the biggest mistake, because I'd look at their stuff and I'm like, oh man, this is going to be tough. And I just know it. And then like through their hands and the way that they approach it, it's like, oh my gosh, this sounds killer.
Yeah.
So I've just kind of learned, like, especially if they're in the pro world, and they have what I would consider an odd series of effects, like don't question it. They're doing their thing and it's cool,
Yeah.
It's all highly personal, man. Like we talk about, excuse me, how, like we talk about it in terms of like touch, how we touch a guitar. Oh man, our fingers are all different. You could play through Jimmy Page's rig, but you'll never sound like Jimmy Page. Well, that factors into the gear too. The way you order the pedals, the way you use the pedals, all of that kind of stuff. I think it's highly personal. So, the rules are the rules for a reason. Like they're a great starting place. But again, so much great music comes about from breaking the rules. And so, yeah, to Grant's point, I think it's really important for anybody to just sit down and mess around with the stuff and figure out what inspires you to play, what you want to play, how to make the sounds you want to hear. Emulating other players is a great place to start, but at some point you have to start making it your own and develop your own voice with it. So I think that's a really important thing to do.
Love it. This is great, guys. Should we get into it?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, not that we haven't been into it already, but I mean the pedalboard, in case I wasn't clear. So I'll post the signal chain and flow of this board in below in the YouTube video. So why don't we get into it? Pope, you can kind of tell us about the pedals. Maybe we can go through in the order that they appear on the board, and maybe just why you have the pedal on there, a main sound or two that you're going to use it for, and we'll just see what comes up.
Yeah.
Awesome, man.
Cool, man.
Start us off.
All right. Well, like the previous rig, we've hidden the guitar input and a tuner out into your nice bank up, bank down box. So that's similar to the last rig. From there, it's into the switcher. All of the pedals on the board, in some way, shape, or form, are integrated in the switcher, with the exception of the Nunaber Immerse Mark II, which is the last pedal. And the reason that's not in a loop, and I'll just address that really quickly to get it out of the way, I kind of use it as just like that base level, foundational reverb, whatever, just that like simple little bit of verb I need for a song. Whatever that amount is, I'll just dial in that pedal for that. And then I don't have to think about it. I don't have to worry about if I change a preset, like, is that gonna change it or any of that stuff, right? So that is just kind of set and forget. And typically I would like that kind of a thing in stereo. So right now, what you're hearing, I have a stereo reverb plugin. It's very subtle. I just think it's helpful. And I've really kind of dialed it in to really just do the same kind of thing I do with the Immerse. So with no pedals on, that's just all it is. Amp's kind of on the edge, mostly clean, tiny little bit of reverb. Again, normally that would be the Immerse on the wet setting, but just to kind of help things along a little bit while we're listening to things. That's the only thing that's not from the board, and that's just something I'm doing since it's in mono. So no big there.
Would you mind just tuning up for us a little bit?
Tuning?
Totally kidding. Totally kidding, man. It's just,
Yeah, man,
just
bro.
something I always hate when people ask me to do, and it's the most subtle passive burn. You're perfectly in tune. It sounds awesome.
I was like, oh man, you scared me. I was like, am I not in? I swear I tuned it before we started this. No,
Totally
Oh,
bugged.
it's great.
that's very good. I'm going to use that on people now.
Oh, it hurts. It hurts. Awesome.
man,
All
my
right. So
heart-
it's bank up down for your input,
Yeah.
tuner out, and then right into the PBC 10. And then what do you have
Yep.
in loop 1?
All right, so the first loop has a few things going on. There's 3 pedals in the loop, and it started out that was kind of the fuzz loop, but I don't need fuzz for every song, and so I wanted the loop to be capable of more than just that. I was like, I don't want to waste a loop just for something that I'm going to use 40-50% of the time, maybe. So it's set up. I've got a Vimirum Oz pedal is fuzz, and let's see. And so clean and with the fuzz.
That's a cool pedal, man.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it because I can crank it up and do the big fuzzy nasty thing. No, I'm sorry. I'm sure everybody misses the evil filter fuzz.
Yeah.
That hasn't gone far. It's still around because as great as that thing was, though, like it kind of did its one thing really well, and then you can take that gnarly fuzz thing and filter it however you like. But this pedal is cool because it kind of borders fuzz and overdrive. Like I really love it in that low gain kind of a thing. Like you can crank it up, roll your guitar volume back, and it does that kind of sparkly thing that a fuzz does when you roll the guitar volume back. But it just sounds really cool for like lo-fi kind of stuff. So for any like retro stuff, like I love playing on Americana music and that kind of thing. Like it's just a really interesting sounding overdrive. Like it sometimes sounds like, well, does the guitar have flats on it? No, but there's this fuzzy thing to it, but there's not a lot of gain to it. Like I just love that sound, and I've been through a lot of fuzz pedals in the past 2 years, and that's just the one I keep coming back to for that. If I crank it up, it can get it gets fuzzy and does that thing, but again, I love the low gain side of it. Okay, so again, I wanted that loop to be able to do more than just fuzz, and so I've been listening to a bunch of music that has phaser, univibe, or just modulation other than chorus, and so I just kind of started messing around with the dark side again. It's been on a board before in the past, but I just love the univibe sound in it, and the phaser sound is great as well. So I guess here's what that sounds like.
Beautiful.
It just has that like cool gulpy sound to it, a little gritty as well. I mean, some of that is the humbuckers on the guitar, but yeah, man, there's I don't know. I just love that sound. You can drench it in a bunch of verb and play high, and it'd totally be usable at church or wherever. But yeah, I just wanted something else available. So anytime that loop's not set up for fuzz, I can use that. And obviously there's the big muff side of it too, which isn't a fuzz sound I use a lot. I think live it tends to either take over things or hide, but in recording, the big muff thing is really great for like layering guitars. You need to do like a big single note, double the bass thing or whatever. So that's useful too. So those are kind of the two main pedals I use in that loop. I'll kind of go back and forth. And then the third one in that loop is the Argonaut, which is a pedal I found out about when I moved out here to Nashville. A great builder out here, Mythos Pedals. and it's this vintage style octave up. So on its own, it sounds like it's, you know, broken or more like a ring mod or something.
Cool.
But the idea is to stack it with an overdrive or a fuzz, and you get that kind of like Jimi Hendrix octave fuzz thing. So,
Yeah.
and the reason that that pedal is on the board is because when everything came together, I had this one little gap and was like, what can I fit here? yeah. I was like, oh man, I'm totally going to put, because it's so fun. Like I'll use it almost never. Like I'll probably mess around with it, you know, before a session starts, or, you know, when I'm just sitting around playing, you know, more than I'll actually put it on records. I mean, I hope to fit it on a record because it sounds awesome. All right, but here it is on its own. So again, if this is like the dry guitar sound. You know, you play half steps or, you know, or whole steps, you get all those dissonant things. But it's really cool for that single note thing.
Oh yeah, that's the octafuzz thing all day long, right there.
Yeah, man. And that's just clean too. Like you throw it on with a fuzz. What's that?
You can almost get into some Jack White type stuff as well.
Oh, totally, man. Totally. Totally has that kind of thing. Or, you know, Jack White or the Black Keys or, you know, any of that kind of, you know, just really dirty fuzz stuff. It's so cool. I mean, you stack it with an overdrive too. That's stacked with the Oz. So it's just a fun one to have around. And then the way that works in the loop, the Argonaut is first, because I feel that helps that, especially like here, if I go to like the neck pickup or something, you know, you'll really hear that octave up come out. You know, do a bend and it kind of does all those weird little frequency things. So yeah, man, it's just a fun one to have around, and it goes Argonaut and then into the dark side, I believe, and then into the Oz. So that's the first loop. Kind of a lot going on, but it's not a lot in the moment. I can just kind of quickly set it up for whatever I want it to be and then turn it on or off. So that's the first loop. Second loop, normal, just Pog 2. Been using that pedal forever. There's a, you know, you can hear it on the last demo or wherever, but it does octaves and a few other things, but mostly octaves, you know.
Now it has the MIDI mod in it.
Yeah, which is cool. My another great rig builder friend who you guys may or may not know, Brian from O'Million Audio. He told me one day, he's like, hey man, like I found this MIDI mod for the Pog 2 and I know you use that pedal. Like, you want to send me a Pog? And I was like, yeah. So yeah, he MIDI modded it, which is really great. I can I've got the switcher kind of programmed to just move up and down through the presets on it, as well as I mean the loop can just turn it on or off. But, you know, again, if I'm setting up presets for a song and I'm able to kind of plan things out ahead of time, that's just that little extra bit of functionality with that pedal is really cool.
Particular mod that he used, there's actually a company out there that sells this mod, and they kind of encourage like a DIY, you know, if you're not afraid to do a little bit of drilling in your pedal case and stuff like that, you can plug it in, hook it in, and get it going. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, definitely fun for all those Pog 2 guys out there.
Do you remember what the company's called, David?
I'm going to look it up while we're chatting.
All right, cool. Awesome. So that was loop 2, loop 3.
Yep.
What do we got there?
Loop 3. So loop 3 is something I don't really use much of anymore, and that's a compressor. So if if anything on this board changes, that'll probably be the first thing to change. I think I used a compressor always on for so many years because I was always playing through backline amps, or even like the amps at Bethel were just like always changing because they were just being played through so much, you know? And so for me in that setting, like the compressor was just kind of nice to just even the playing field a little bit. But now playing through my own stuff all the time, I just don't find myself really using it anymore. But for the odd time that I do, so like it is helpful when you want a clean sound. Like if I just dig in on this clean sound right now, the amp will break up a little bit. Right? But if I kick the compressor on, it stays a little cleaner. And so obviously, I mean, you know, it's good for that kind of thing. You could do the chicken picking stuff with it. The Keeley Compressor Pro, probably one of my favorite compressors because I think it's super versatile. I love that it's got a VU meter on it, so you can actually see how much gain reduction you're getting on your signal. I think compressors are really, really easy to kind of screw up your guitar sound with. Oftentimes, by the time you hear it working, even for someone whose ear is trained enough to hear it, that can often be too much.
Totally.
So I think that pedal is really great, and it sounds awesome. I mean, it's like having a studio piece on your board. So not something I use a ton, but maybe for the odd slide part or whatever. It's one of those things, like I used it so much in the past, and I kind of had room for it here. I was like, you know what, I'm just going to try it on the board for now and see how it works. And if it ends up being something that I just never use, I can always swap it out for a different kind of pedal, but yeah, if you're going to get a compressor, check out the Keeley Compressor Pro.
Can
really
can I ask, just for some ear candy,
yeah,
you know how to chicken pick. Can you give us 5 seconds of moving around the fretboard?
I know how to fake it.
Fake it.
It's been a minute and I'm still waking up. My fingers at least. It's been way too long. That was awful.
That's awesome, man.
But there it is. That I know I'm in Nashville now, but that's not my thing. Anyways, yeah, you can do something really bad like that, or you can use it for a whole host of things. Compressors, are great. Again, it's just something I haven't been using a ton of. So yeah,
well, I love it, man. Thanks for indulging me. I remember the first video we did, and I hadn't really heard you play other than Bethel stuff, and you started whipping out all these licks. I'm like, holy cow, this guy can move around the fretboard. Like, I had to get another taste, and that did it for me. So thank you.
All right, cool.
All right, so we had the POG 2, which David just mentioned, the MIDI mod, Loop 2, Keeley Compressor Pro in 3, and then in Loop 4.
Loop 4 is the trusty ZVEX SHO, which is just, it's the clean boost pedal I've been using since I was like 16 or something, man. I just can't move on from it. And then also in that loop as well is the Clover. There's so many instances where like one section of a song to the next is like, you've got your overdrive on or whatever, and then for the chorus or whatever, you just want to kick on a boost pedal and have a little bit more. And so I, again, didn't want to waste a loop for that, right? I found, especially too with the previous versions of the rig, like when programming stuff out in the RJM, so many times it'd be like, preset 3 would just be like overdrive and like a delay on, and then preset 3 to 4 would just be adding the boost, exactly the same. And that would happen just a million times throughout the songs that I was programming out. So it's like, I'll just put it in the same loop, and if I need it, I'll just kick it on. So, all right, so here's the JHS Clover again. Dry. it just sounds like I'm, turning up the amp a little bit. Nothing really crazy at all. I like it because it's just got some clean gain going to the amp in terms of a volume knob, and then just really simple bass metal treble EQ if you want to shape things. Feels like it plays nice with every guitar and every amp I've thrown it at. So
Yeah,
that's great. And then if I want more, kick it with the SHO and you're good to go. So
yeah, dude.
I keep things really simple with overdrive. Now I think recording wise, the least amount of gain you can get away with using, the better. Or sometimes turning the gain up and playing really soft as opposed to like digging in and playing really hard, like I'm very used to doing. Get really excited live and you just dig in. So yeah, I'm just kind of looking for overdrives that can kind of work with my playing, and I can turn the gain up and play light, or I can turn it down and dig in a little bit more, and it kind of works for all those different things. So
something interesting that came up with the interview we just did with Nigel Mateus. Since
Yeah.
COVID, obviously churches are pre-recording services,
mhm.
and Nigel was saying that it's changed the approach and how they've had to play, because they no longer, speaking of recording clean, they no longer can kick on 3 overdrives, which sounds great in the house, but in recording it sounds a bit thin and a little bit more farty, and it just doesn't have this, it doesn't translate the same way that it does going straight through front of house.
Yeah.
They've had to adjust how they play, adjust how they record to use less overdrive, which ironically makes the guitar sound bigger and more full.
Yeah.
And so it's cool hearing you relay a similar thought.
It's so true, man. Like a lot of other guitar players, and if you haven't been watching, you should. The great Tom Bukovac has been doing guitar lessons on YouTube, and it's one of the greatest things. I mean, I've been a fan of his for many years, but he talks about working with AC/DC's producer, and they're doing a power chord track, and the guy kept telling him, "Hey, man, play lighter." But they were doing these big power chord things. It's like, hey, what's the deal? Like, you want it big, you want to, dig in and do that thing. But he's like, no, man, you turn it up and you play light. Because the notes bloom and sustain, you start the note out by having your loudest peak, like it can kind of only go down from there. And that approach makes so much sense. And ever since being reminded of that, and especially, just again, when you're going back and forth too, from like recording to live and going back and forth from those environments, like so much more of the live thing translates into your studio playing without you really even thinking about it. But when you're only sitting under the microscope of studio monitors, it's like, oh man, like what is, like, I haven't changed anything. Why is this bothering me all of a sudden? Oh, I'm playing too hard. Oh,
Right.
This, this technique is formed from, live energy, and that stuff is great. But, I think live at volume, just straight up volume, covers a multitude of sins.
Definitely.
And so, I think that's why you can get away with stacking 3 or 4 overdrives live versus, in a studio environment. So yeah, man, I'm just looking for overdrives that kind of react in that way, and I can shape them. Like another thing, when you're in the studio, finding stuff that you can just take a lot of low end out of as well can be really, really great. And so one thing I love about this pedal is it's got a low cut on it, so I can automatically kick it in and kind of have that lower stuff automatically cut out, regardless of, obviously I could, accentuate it with a bass control or something, but you're looking for stuff that really fits you into that certain, mid-range frequency that guitar's supposed to be living in. So pedals like the Clover are really great for that, because the guitar will naturally do it, but you can really fine tune it with just that simple EQ. So yeah, big fan of that.
Yeah, and the Clover is based on that old Boss green pedal from the 80s, right?
Yeah.
Was it called the FET or something?
FA1.
FA1, that's it.
Yeah, that amplifier 1. it had like a belt clip on it, so you could like
Edge, right?
I
yeah.
remember seeing that on the Edge's rack rig multiple times over the years.
Yeah,
So,
that's the first time I saw that pedal, and I've played a couple originals, and they're very cool sounding. It just, I mean, especially here. I mean, here, I don't have the Strat right now. I mean, it's sitting there, but I won't grab it. But I've got the pick. You know, it just kind of like there's this upper register thing that pedal communicates really, really well in the way it overdrives. And so, you know, I don't know if that's what the Edge thinks about it, but, you know, when I think about his playing and then I kick an amp, particularly like an AC30 style amp with that pedal, there's this really nice upper register thing that it does with the, you know, the overdrive and the grippy pick.
that pedal to me seems like one of those problem solver pedals, because like I'll have a lot of guys who are like, man, like I'm playing live and I'll go between my humbucker guitar and then I'll switch over to a Tele or a Strat and it sounds thinner. What do I do? And I'm like, well, maybe try something like that, you know, to where you can tweak the EQ a little bit, kick it on and round out the sound of the Strat. You know, if doing it on the tone controls isn't quite enough, or you need just a little bit more level for it to hit the amp the same way in a live situation. And I've always wondered if that's what the Edge used it for. Of course, I'll never know until I can ask Dallas Shue face to face.
No, right?
So we had the show into the Clover for Loop 4, and then we go into the first insert point on the PBC.
Yeah. Okay, so that again, kind of like the last rig, I think that's the loop we used for the audition box that you guys make. And so obviously something like that is great, you know, recording. It's like, man, this track just needs to be this specific pedal. Now I don't have to rip up the board. I can just plug it in there. But to bring up something that when I initially sent all the info over to David for the build, he went, "Oh man, no Benson preamp," because that's been a mainstay for me ever since it came out. And so the way I use that loop, I've got the preamp Mark II version out, and so that lives on the desk. And really, that pedal could do everything. That could be the only overdrive pedal between all the different sounds you can make it do, and the MIDI functionality and all that stuff. And I'll just say this, man, like as fun as it is to plug in with MIDI and watch the faders dance around on their own and all that kind of stuff, I love having it on the desk and being able to just reach out and touch it and move faders to get a sound. Like it you know, it's like working on a console for mix guys or something. Like I just love that tactile thing. And so that's what I'm running in that insert loop, like almost 100% of the time. If I need to plug in something else there, I can. But that pedal lives on the desk. And so, you know, if I go somewhere else to work or whatever, I can put it up on a surface, or I can put it on the floor. I've got it, you know, it will work with the switcher and MIDI. I've got it set up to do that. But when I'm just home, you know, working here, I can have it right up next to me and dial things in. And that's still kind of my main overdrive sound. Like I'll use the Clover for just a little bit more, or even again for like the, you know, little more gain on a clean tone thing because you're playing super light. But this preamp is more the main overdrive sound. So here's that, I guess, really quick. And that pedal just, I just love the sound of it, man. I'll admit, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, that's cool. But, you know, I've got a Chimera, I've got a preamp pedal, like I'm good. And then I made the mistake of playing one of those at Chris's shop and was like, oh, dang it, I have to have one. So and it was chance and luck that I got it, because I literally just walked into Eastside Music Supply, which is a great pedal shop just down the street from my house. And I walked in to trade another pedal, and the guy was like, "Oh, dude, man, you've got like a bunch of store credit here that I guess I just forgot about." And so I was able to, all right, well, let's pre-order that. And
I love it, man. It's like everything I loved about the preamp, but then, I mean, especially with that mid-range control, it's just perfect. So, yeah, so that's kind of the main overdrive thing for me, and that runs in that insert point.
So you can get your Benson preamp sound and then like a million other versions.
Yeah, man, the fuzz in this thing is insane. I don't know if you guys have heard the fuzz yet. So that's just overdrive with like a little bit of added mid from the.
The fuzz. Sorry for the feedback.
Right, and then it does a gated one, which is crazy.
So good. And then Loop 5 is a pedal I've personally never had the chance to play, but is close to the top of my list on next pedals to get.
Okay, Loop 5, jumping up. So obviously from the insert point, it comes back into the board. And Loop 5 is the JHS Color Box version 2. And I've been intrigued by this pedal because I've seen a lot of really rad guitar players using the Color Box for a while now. And obviously, I mean, if you know anything about classic recorded guitar tones, you know that many of the ones you hear are not guitar into amplifier. A lot of them are guitar straight into a recording console.
Yep.
And so, man, I mean, it's something I've done a fair bit of, like certainly not on like Bethel Records or anything like that, but you know, other stuff when it's applicable, it's great to plug a guitar in to one of my pre's down here and just do that like kind of chonky, wacky DI sound. And so I got the Color Box thinking like, oh, this will be really cool and it'll be a really easy way. Like I don't have to get a splitter or a DI or something. I can just plug an XLR cable into it and use it that way. And I certainly can, and it's awesome for that. But what I didn't expect when I got the board back, I really love it. It's just like a straight up overdrive as well. Like it can do so many different things between the EQ, between the different ways you can set up the gain, and then like even having like the high pass on it to just like on a on off switch too, where you can just like get a really thin kind of filtered tone and then flick the switch and back into full range. That like there's so many cool things you can do with that pedal. So all right, clean sound, right? Keeping up with my A chord theme. Here's a G. I'll get it. I'll break the mold a little bit. It just sounds so great. Like I almost think again, I mean, depending on what happens with that compressor loop, like I could use that in a lot of ways like I would use the Clover, and maybe the Clover will turn into, you know, a different kind of EQ pedal or something someday. But that was one of those things that was unexpected. Like I just love that sound so much for that slightly cranked amp thing.
Maybe that's a little gainier than I'd have it too, but
there's just a clarity to it, and it just feels like it sings really well. So,
and then if you want to get crazy, you just
flip a switch and send it into chaos mode. It sounds baller. So
good.
That's been a fun one for me. And another great thing, man, for anybody out there who's recording guitars at home or playing at home, having a good EQ section somewhere on the board, like that's somewhat comprehensible. Like I love that he added the shift controls for the EQ, so you can kind of sweep the frequencies and then boost or cut. Like that is such a usable thing, and takes I mean, it's really it looks complicated, right? There's 10 knobs on the thing, but it's so easy to use, and you can just very quickly boom, get a really interesting sounding guitar tone. It's hard not to leave that one on just all the time.
Yeah. Oh, that's great, man. So that was loop 5, and then we start getting into some of the fun stuff as well. Getting into loop 6. Tell us what you have there.
Sure. So, big vibrato guy. It's probably my favorite modulation effect. And so I've tried a bunch of different ones. I had some really weird, interesting ones, but for some reason, a lot of vibrato pedals like add latency to your guitar sound or to your playing, and that just always bothers me. And so I don't know. I just keep coming back to that Aqueduct because there's not really a latent thing to it, and I love all the different options in it. The random mode again, like from the last demo, kind of sounds like tape modulation. So here's that. You know, sounds a little seasick, but sometimes that's cool. So yeah, that's kind of my go-to vibrato pedal. The sine and triangle wave thing is great. And then one of the modes too, like the harder you hit the guitar, the further it bends the pitch out. So it's almost like, you know, doing some kind of with the whammy bar thing. So that's
cool.
kind of fun too.
Awesome, man. All right, so that's Aqueduct, and then we have the second insert point on the PBC-10.
So that loop has a couple Vertex pedals to start with. It goes to the Steel String Clean Boost first, which is just kind of like a more better clean tone for me.
So it's adding a little gain there. I'd probably clean it up a little bit more normally, but
you know, particularly with single coils, I think that's a great pedal. Sometimes it's nice to kind of dial things in for guitar like this and then use that when you switch to a Tele or a Strat. But this new version with the bass cut switch just makes it, again, even more usable than the previous version. So that's kind of how I use that. It's just like a different
color, you know. If I want things to sound a little bigger and have a little more of that like 3D thing, then
that's kind of the pedal I go to for that. After that is just the Vertex Boost, which just a normal lead boost, you know, whatever tone you have going on, but louder. And then that's also the volume control. We relocated the expression jack on that to run through that bank up, bank down switch, like the input. And so if I want to use the volume pedal on the side, I can. Right now, actually, I've just got like a little knob, like
nice.
a tiny little knob box.
Great.
And you know, I don't know. I just didn't really want to put a volume pedal on the board. Especially when I'm home, like it's just not something I really use all that much anymore. And then, you know, if I'm, you know, for some reason playing live with this rig, or if I need one, I can add it basically. So yeah, those are kind of my two favorite Vertex pedals right there. And then the last thing in that loop is the Megabyte, which is a Caroline Guitar Company delay pedal. And that's there because I've been a long time fan of the Kilobyte pedal. And this is kind of the same thing, just has tap tempo and all that. And so that's kind of my dark analog delay. It's probably set up like a slap back right now. Yeah. The thing with that pedal is like, I love really dark analog delays. I mean, I'm mostly a tape guy, and we can get into that with the Volante, but mostly being into the tape thing, which is brighter, I like to contrast it with something darker. And so I guess kind of like how I'd use the Brigadier in years past, like that's just kind of an all-purpose delay. I can get really washed out with it. I can make it, you know, do all that kind of stuff. And then too, like
sometimes it's really nice when stacking delays to have something. So between the RGM and the Volante, like I can have the Volante tempo synced with the song and have delays
very exact and perfectly lined up with the song. Then when you stack a delay on top of that, sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of that like out of tempo thing with the very in tempo thing. I just love that sound. Like it's a little bit of, it's like, it feels like the best of both worlds for me. And so, yeah, if I just need like a dark tap tempo delay, it's there. It's like general all purpose delay for me. In terms of like auxiliary delay stuff, I guess the main one would be the Volante, but yeah, it's just those 3 pedals in that insert point, and then we're back into the switcher, and things start going stereo. Not for this video, but stereo, capable. Good old Vertex modded Aryan chorus.
My favorites ever.
Yeah, man, dude.
Stole your other one.
Yeah, I remember. I don't know. Maybe did you hear it when you built that first board for me? You heard it at some point, and then we're like, dude, do you want to work trade that pedal, and I'll do some setups and stuff? And I was like, yeah, for sure, man. I don't need to. And then
I had multiple vintage ones from the 80s, and I loved it, but they weren't true bypass, and they're just quirky.
Yeah,
and
they're all different.
This was kind of like all of it. All of the problems were solved, and it sounded amazing, more low end, all of that. So I really wanted it, and I was like, bro, let me know what you need worked on, and we'll do a little trade.
I love it. Again, that's another one from the previous demo I think folks would have heard. I've been using that off and on for years now. All right, so from there, it gets weird with the microcosm, which, Grant, to answer your question earlier, the idea behind that pedal came about because as a modern day guitar player, like no matter what session you go to, it's pretty common, like you finish your take or your tracks for the day and you're getting ready to pack up, and the drummer's loading all their stuff out, and the producer goes, hey man, hey, can you stick around and like just make some noises and stuff for me? Like it's just like church music, pop music, anything. Like there's so many layers to music now, right? And so I love doing that kind of stuff. It's always really, really fun. And, you get your little tricks with like delay pedals and reverbs or, modulation, whatever. But I'm always looking for stuff that's like kind of weird and out there, but also musical. Cause it's like, even when a producer's like, hey man, like I just need some weird noises and stuff like that, they don't really want weird stuff. They want musical stuff, And so I've kind of been a fan of the company Hologram for a while. And when I saw that they were coming out with the microcosm, like all I had to do was see it to know, like, yeah, I'm going to want that. Even since having the board, I was just working on a little song for Hunter yesterday and the day before, and was doing these like droney tracks. And it was like, okay, like how can I make these drones sound more interesting? And that pedal totally, kind of like David did, you just set up a loop or you set up a sound to go and you just start spinning knobs and wait for it to, just make the most insane sound. So this is just where it happened to turn on. Wait for it to kick in here. Come on, buddy. There we go. It's all the kind of stuff that like normally I'd have to like get really weird with a pedal board and then record it into Pro Tools and then chop it up a bunch of different ways and throw like a billion plugins on it. But I don't have to do that. I can just turn that pedal on and mess around really quick. And that is one of many, 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 many things that it can do. And so that thing has just been a blast. And I love too having a pedal board that is capable of some just very normal, classic, no frills guitar tones. Like nothing anyone's hearing today is like, oh my God, that's crazy. It's insane. You know, it's all this stuff is very normal. But then having a pedal like that's very abnormal. You know, and it's probably something like most of the guys I've seen using that are all like ambient post rock guys that, you know, just play those shapes and let pedals go nuts, you know? And yeah, man, that's just it's a fun one.
It's so cool, man. And it looks and feels like it's straight out of the 70s or something, like
Yeah.
from one of the sci-fi movies back then.
Yeah, man, it totally has that feel, just like the weird, like off-white beige look to it, but then all the spacey little lights that go back and forth. It's very cool. It's the most different sounding pedal I've heard in a long time, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if it catches on and you start seeing those on a lot of boards. I think their first batch is very likely sold out now, but I think as they do more, like I think that's
Going to do pretty well for them just because of all the different things that it can do. And again, like I think you can use those kinds of sounds.
in so many different kinds of music.
It kind of puts it puts the creativity really up to you, the player, as in the pedal has infinite possibilities, and it's your job to go and, you know, dive in and explore essentially and find them.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about it too, because like, you know, you've got the two camps in the guitar player world, right? You've got the guys that like want to play all the effects, and they're like, no, man, the effects are an instrument too. And they're totally right. And then you've got the other camp that's like, oh no, man, it's all about your playing, and you know, screw pedals. Like you just want to plug your guitar into the amp and let your fingers do the talking. And the cool thing about a pedal like this is the sounds you get out of it. Like obviously it's doing its own thing, right? And just going nuts and making a bunch of weird sounds, but it's entirely like the sounds you get out of it are entirely based on your playing. You know, like deciding to do a bend into it versus, you know, playing a note or putting a little vibrato. Like all those little things come through. Essentially, what it's doing, right, is taking little snippets of your playing and reinterpreting it in all these different ways. And I love that. Like it's still like I feel really connected to it as a guitar player, but then it's doing things that I've never heard a pedal do before. So yeah, I could rant on that one all day. It's a really cool one. And again, like you might kick it on every little once in a while, you know, in a live set or something, but man, it's really special when you do.
Can I also compliment your impression of a producer?
Thank you.
It was very well done. You know, perfect. So we have the Microcosm in 8 in stereo, connected to MIDI, and also then we move on to Loop 9, also connected to MIDI and in stereo. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, and so that's the Volante. Of course, as soon as I move away from Strymon pedals, they would put a pedal like that out. And again, classic case of initially go, oh man, that looks awesome, but I just moved away from Strymon. I'm good. And again, turn it on. I have to have it. I've always I've always loved the sound of tape delay, you know, like even going back to like DL4 days, like if a pedal had a tape setting on it, that was always just the one I ended up using because that's just the sound I liked. And I mean, now I've got some old tape delays and I've used, you know, bunches of other ones for different things at different studios, and they're just fun, man, but they're also really high maintenance. They're finicky, you know, they're like vintage guitars. You always got to keep up with them and tweak on them. And when they're working awesome, they're great, but they're not always working at 100%. And sometimes that's musical, sometimes it's not. Nothing will ever sound like a real tape delay. We'll get that out of the way, right? But it nails that kind of sound and vibe. And then the way they included modern features, whether just MIDI clock or being able to pan the different heads or half volume them, or like all these things that you can't do with the vintage tape machine. Like it just does a whole host of things. And I love the looper thing on it too, because it's more sound on sound and less of like a traditional looper. So the cool thing about that is like in conjunction with the microcosm, which has a more traditional looper on it, and also sample and hold. So I can, hit a chord or hit a note and freeze it with the microcosm. I can loop that into the Volante with all the tape artifacts and the weird stuff. I can reverse it, or, like one of the fun things to do with the Volante is it's got the 3 speeds on it that are in little increments. So you can do stuff like, let me just make it real drastic here.
Like that's all on one switch.
And so having those, scrubby, tapey things on top of something weird like the microcosm, and being able to turn that in a loop and reverse it or slow it down, or, all those different, tape transport things. It's awesome. It's like between those 2 pedals, I could have an ambient, aneurysm. It's just so much, but it's also really easy just to get a great sound out of it. And, I can tempo sync it as well, which is really, really great. So yeah, it's kind of been my, just go-to, because it's got the tape sound that I love, and it's got all the features that I need. Yeah. What's not to love?
I'm going to say, a lot of guys will ask, like, does it have presets? If you have a MIDI switcher, it's got up to 300 presets.
Yeah.
MIDI. So,
yeah, man.
As long as you don't mind programming, you can do everything you'd want to do with it.
Yeah, and even for guys that doesn't, it's got a favorite switch, so you can toggle back and forth between 2 presets, which is all you really need in a lot of applications. Tap tempo. You could even without a MIDI switcher, there's plenty of like MIDI clock things out there. The Sela or the Disaster stuff or whatever. Like you could still tempo sync it with something like that. But then just have those 2 presets. So it can be as simple or as complicated as you want, and it sounds great. And the spring reverb in it too is just like,
it's killer.
It's so good. Like it's all that springy goodness. So yeah, man, that's a killer pedal.
Before we go on to the next one, I don't know if Pope, you're aware of the timing of the Volante release was actually shortly after your second pedal board where you ditched the Strymons. And there's a conspiracy theory out on all the major forums that Strymon wanted to get you back. And
well, it worked.
they created a pedal.
The Pope Destroyer.
It worked. I can neither confirm nor deny any involvement. No.
And now on to my personal favorite reverb pedal currently. Tell us about Loop 10.
Man, it's been a favorite for me as well. Just the Maris Mercury 7. Again, it can do a whole lot. There are little things about it that I wish it did differently, maybe coming from a Strymon camp, but with reverb, I know with the Bethel stuff, like, if you looked at my presets for the Big Sky or whatever, like it was all different all the time. And there were so many different little things that I would tweak for sections of songs. But to do that, like, you're diving into menus and you're doing things, and it still has a pretty quick workflow. The nice thing about this is I can just reach down, whatever the knobs are doing. Like I don't have it hooked up to MIDI or anything. We did put the TRS thing in it, which I haven't programmed yet. I've got to figure out how to do that. And that's just so I can essentially toggle between like a down and up position on an expression pedal, right? With a switch on the switcher. So, at some point, maybe I'll get 2 sounds out of it. For the most part, I really just use it as like a big spacey thing. Again, I've got that Immerse Mark II kind of handling just that base layer of stuff. Reverb for me, in terms of recording, more than it's coming from a pedal, it's usually coming from a plugin, just because I like to use different reverbs for different tracks. I think, like for me, if I just stack up a bunch of tracks with Big Sky, Cloud Verb on it, it starts to smush together in kind of a weird way. And so I've got that pedal when I need that sound on the board. I mean, it's just big reverb.
You know, swell into it, do a big single note thing into it, whatever. Like reverb is sonic glue, right? Like it can
Just really stick your guitar sound in a track. And so, yeah, that's what I use it for, but I kind of tend to use it in conjunction with a lot of other things as well. And I know after messing around with this Benson pedal, like I know Chase Bliss is working on a reverb based on the old Lexicon units, kind of in the same vein of this Preamp Mark II. So that's kind of what is piquing my interest next. Like I love the sounds in this, and it's great as a pedal, but being more into maybe some of the plug-in sounds and also being able to use my hands for things, that will probably be, assuming, you know, I connect with the way it sounds, which it functions like the preamp and sounds as good as the Mercury 7, which I'm sure it will. That'll likely be a winner. But yeah, man, reverb's kind of funny for me these days. I love it, but it just comes from a million different places, and that was the pedal that fit on the board. So yeah.
And just to clarify as well, so it's hooked up to the PBC's function switch. So you can use the PBC to externally control different aspects of it, which is different than hooking it up to MIDI, which you could also do with the Mercury 7.
Right.
But yeah, it's a cool option to be able to do some limited control through the function switch PBC.
Yeah, the issue I have with the Merc 7 is I can never remember what the background features are and settings are with it, like the alternate functions on it.
Power up settings.
Yeah, power up settings, and just like it's not for me, and I've spent some time with it. Like it's just not been something that's really easy to set up as anything more than just like what you see on the surface is what you get. And so that's just kind of how I've decided to use it. And especially with, you know, using more plugins and stuff, like that Merc 7 will probably get used more like if I go to another studio and work and like I'm not sitting at a computer where I've got plugins and that kind of thing. But like sitting here, like, I mean, the reverb you're hearing now is a UAD RMX 16. And I mean, this thing can get way crazier than a lot of pedals can. And I mean, then you start getting into like Valhalla verbs and the Sound Toys stuff, and it's really easy just to like, you know, with a few clicks of a switch, like all of a sudden,
you know, here's a plugin. And there's like a fidelity that
plugins have for reverbs that pedals often don't. And so for recording, I found myself going in that direction more as of late. But that's not to say anything about the sound of those things, because they sound really, really amazing. They're just kind of there if I need them.
Yep. Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, so that's the board. Just again, pretty simple, couple overdrive options, there's a little bit of everything. Like it's a bit of a kitchen sink, right? And I guess that was the point, and it's really simple to use. You can just kind of reach down, tweak some knobs. It's got preset capability with the RJM, but you don't have to use it that way. And having kind of a hybrid setup like that is really great because, you know, if I've got a more chill session I'm working on, you know, if I'm playing live on the floor and we're just doing one or two songs in the day, then great. I can, you know, in the first pass or two, figure out what my part or what my tones need to be, program that in like 2 minutes. And then I just hit one switch and I can focus on playing and doing that. And it's great. But then if we're moving really fast, I can just leave it all in instant access mode, you know, punch in the tempo on the editor and be done with it. And just use it like a traditional pedal board. So again, it just kind of checks all my boxes for recording and stuff. And it's all very normal stuff. Like, again, I'm sure, you know, listening back to this is just like, yeah, it, you know, just sounds like a guitar, nothing, you know, all that special or all that unique. It's all about what you do with it in the context of a track.
And there's a couple more things to quickly brush up on for those people that might be interested. Power supply, you're doing 4 Ojais. And the reason for that is so that 4 Ojais fit under the Aero Series creation board with the feet extensions. So it looks beautiful. I'll put a picture up in the video. David did
the bottom of the board looks stellar, man. Like hats off to that. Like I was almost excited to see the underside of it more than I was to see the top, because I kind of knew what the top was going to look like from laying it out and up here. But man, when he sent me photos, like the bottom of it was just like, that's clean. That's good stuff, man.
Yeah, feels
where all the cables are, man. I was like, when you sent it to me, I'm like, okay, because you literally used every square inch of pedalboard space on the top.
I tried, man. That was the goal. I want everything. I just want everything to be clean, and I don't, especially now more than ever. Like I don't like seeing mess. I don't like seeing cables. Like I don't want to see all that stuff again. Like it just adds to that option anxiety. Like want to see and get to the tools that I need when I need them, and just be able to sit down and play without thinking of the technical stuff. The weekend is a good time to think about, oh man, maybe I should look at getting getting this kind of amp or that kind of thing, but yeah, I need to stop with the gear stuff. And I've been really trying to stop, and I've been selling off a lot of stuff and just getting out of that headspace, trying to stay creative and everything, with this board. And, the reason behind it is just streamlining and staying in that creative space. So
yeah,
you guys crushed it, man.
You filled it up, man. And, the cool thing about this particular board that John from Creation designed is that it's a flat board, but it has those spaces where you can run cables through. And with the foot extensions, I was able to do literally 99% of the cabling underneath.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the bulk of it is. All the power supplies, the MIDI, Quadra, your output junction, that's kind of like special and just for you, with a little logo on there, which I think you posted about that, right?
Yeah, man. That was great. Did you ever hear the original idea for that?
No, he hasn't.
Oh, man. I get a text from Grant, right? Like, hey, man, we're about to make your output box. Do you want any custom graphics? And I was like, nah, like, it's going to be under a board. What do I need graphics for? And then I was like, oh my God, you know what you should do? Like, can you put David's face on it? Because I wanted you to, in my head, like I saw it going to your house, and I just saw you opening the box and seeing that moment of confusion.
Oh, dude, I
tried, man. I tried. I curved your Instagram and everything, trying to find a picture of just your face. Found one, put it into the engraving program, and it just didn't translate, man. Your face it's just got too much for the program to handle.
For longevity's sake, I'm so glad it didn't work out, because that just wouldn't have made sense to anyone else if they saw that. But then secondly, I would have been super confused.
Well, needless to say, when I opened the box, it was a pleasant surprise, and equally as funny. It felt like my own goof got turned back around on me. So that box, great.
That box, to clarify, it has stereo inputs, and it has 2 built-in DIs for people wondering, that also can act as SGIs. So you can either send your signal to isolation booths like you were mentioning in the studio, or you can use a 1/4-inch outputs straight out to amps or straight out to your interface, or however you want to run it. So it's a super simple box. Comes with summing, ground lift phase, all that. And then the custom graphic was just a fun little add-on. But yeah, final specs on the board: 4 Ojais, Aero 32x16. And then you can run your volume off the side of the board, which obviously wouldn't be in the main board shot. But yeah, it's a great board, man. Thank you so much for telling us about it, running us through all the different sounds. David, thank you for doing an unbelievable job putting this thing together. And I think it all came together really well. Thanks for the interview, guys. And anything else you want to add? Pope, David, final words of wisdom?
Can't wait to do number 4, man. Let's do it.
It'll happen at some point. And if there's anything I know about myself at this point, it's there will be more boards in the future to do. So one of many more. Hopefully, though, this one will stay together, and we'll just be adding additional boards, not redoing the same one over and over via tragedy. So, yeah. And then just, I mean, thanks to you guys, man. You guys are, I mean, even when we're not doing boards, just reaching out and asking questions. Hey, like, how does this work or that work? Or just running ideas past you guys, man. You guys have been an invaluable tool for myself and guys like me. And I'm sure lots of other, players out there, whether they're pros or weekend guys, whatever. I think anyone out there, if you're traveling with a board, or even if you just want a board that's really, really clean, it's going to work well and reliably every time, invest in having work done by these guys, because it's top notch, second to none. And I mean, I love it. Thank you guys so much for another great board. Awesome.
Dude, totally, man. Always a pleasure to work with you, bro.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much. We'll see you later.
See ya.
All right, man. See ya.